a discussion entitled No Way to Wow. Selling security and innovation to leaders. Now, the thing for me here is these are three people that are the top of the game. They've been in multiple CSO roles. Gary, in fact, has moved beyond security into the sort of decision-making C-suite as an ops VP. So this session, I wanted to bring a book that I find really useful. And it's called The Human Element by Lauren Nordgren and David Schontal. It's not a security book, it's about influences and the resistance to good ideas. So in a quick summary, the book explains that if you had a bullet out of a rifle and you fire that bullet, it would carry, because of the curvature of the earth, it would carry on forever. So what happens, it can hit a wall, the wind will move it side by side, gravity will pull it to the ground. So it's the frictions, the resistance to that bullet that stops it in its tracks. And it's like a bullet is a good idea. That's the metaphor. And so we could put more black powder behind the idea of our security innovation plan. But if you hit the resistances, the 4 frictions that are in this book, it's never going to succeed. So what I want to explore with these guys is how we navigate those frictions. So the first friction is inertia. And inertia is basically why we stick with what we know. So people generally are reluctant to embrace new ideas and possibilities, even when they know that the benefits are obvious and indisputable. The status quo is familiarity. We've always done it this way. Why are we changing? So what I wanted to kick off, and I'm going to come to Gary first with this because I know he's been through a lot of this. So Gary, how have you acclimated an idea to enhance take-up of what you wanted to input for the business?
Thanks, Rick, and morning, everybody. I reflect back on what Tom said, because I think it's much wider than a single idea about collaboration, and I loved his term, how can I help you in the business? For me, I see myself as a leader in our business and historically having a security specialism. So the same as somebody from another business function, HR, finance, or whatever, ultimately you're a leader in that business. And I think the starting point is you need to understand the business you're operating in. So I don't work in a security business. I work in a business which runs venues, puts events on, stadiums, theatres, arenas, all that kind of stuff. So you've got to understand and assimilate into that business before you go anywhere else. So the leader bit is important. When I first got into my role, I was the director of security. Coming from a public sector background, policing and stuff, I wasn't very commercially driven. Yeah.
Right.
So you've got to understand that bit and what drives your business. Most businesses are there to make money, yeah, for their shareholders or the owner, whoever it is. And unless you understand that, your ideas, you're not going to get them across the line, are you?
Yeah.
So the starting point for me was developing a business plan for security. And I spoke to a number of people and says, who also worked in similar roles to me, what have you done in terms of that? And there wasn't much out there. So other departments have business plans for their departments, so why hasn't the security department got one? Some of those plans were very ambitious, some of them were aspirational, but that was my starting point to gain credibility that the lead of security in a business is as important as the CFO, is as important as the head of HR, or whatever other business functions you've got in your business. So it's wider than just one idea. I think you've got to gain yourself some credibility, but also really fundamentally understand the business that you're working in.
And how important is your influence and your personality and the empathy you display to that success? I mean, can you be bolshy and still achieve what you want?
I'll go back to Tom's point. It is about collaboration and bringing people on a long journey and try not to do everything on day one.
Yeah.
And I think the business plan, I did a 3-year plan and some of which, when I look back now, maybe 6 years later, some of those more aspirational bits still have not been achieved, and I've passed on for somebody else now to add further aspiration to it. So, I do think you've got to gain your own credibility and not be that no person and not be that person that's putting that worrying monkey on somebody else's shoulder. You're there to help the business. You're there to help the business to be successful, whatever that business is.
Right, so the second friction in the book is listed as effort, which basically means humans are lazy. Humans are programmed to find the greatest reward for the least amount of effort. So this is Zipf's law on language, shows how people abbreviate words, for instance. So, you know, mathematics, we call it math, or maths. That's just an example of the sort of laziness. So we always find a shortcut wherever we can. And that can be used to our advantage, but it also is something we have to challenge in a culture of a workplace that we have to overcome. Now, Guy, you know, where you worked at Suntory, would you agree that simplicity is a tool to enhance workforce consideration for that project that you're trying to implement? You know, it's like the 3 clicks to, if online, if you 3 clicks, more than 3 clicks to get to what you're going to buy, people leave it, right? So does that apply with projects you've had experience with?
Absolutely, and for those people who know me, I'm a very simple soul, Rick, and I try to be a simple soul. And just picking up on the bolshy comment, I think you can be bolshy, certainly in the corporate world, but good bolshy. And also people would know me as a nag, but you can be a good nag. But yes, I would agree. I think, I was thinking about an example to bring into today, and for us it was trying to bring in at Suntory, certainly very complex multinational, Japanese owned, 3rd largest food and drink in the world, but multi-regional. We wanted to bring in a sort of series of interactive briefings and awareness training sessions, trying to bring in a new risk management governance model. That's obviously not an easy sell. It's not particularly sexy for bringing in, and people really are going to be quite resistant. We've got so much to do. Picking up on Gary's point, you know, they've got commerciality to have as an endeavour. But I think what we tried to do was, through a series of interactive roadshows, that takes time, that takes effort. Guess what? That's going to cost money in corporate. Yeah. So that's the training investment piece. But we put together an immense amount of preparation. We put in the relevant content, humour, which I think is always absolutely fundamental to trying to get messages across. And we interspersed it with plenty of video and audio examples, because we all know we want to have a live interactive session. And I think we made those examples relevant with our partners in the various nationalities and regional aspects that we were briefing to. And of course, we made it competitive. We had the advantage that we are a multinational, so we brought in a good way, nationalistic rivalry, channeled in a suitably appropriate way. But we also took the disciplines from various groups as well, so supply chain, logistics, IT. And the whole concept was to go to each of those roadshows, and I was taking out partners, so I was taking them away from their day job, putting a lot of money into doing that and the travel. But the return on investment was huge, because what we got people to do was buy into the risk concept. We wanted them to then take on risk management governance. We wanted them to run their own risk managers and their own risk sectors, so that my team could then focus on the strategic, holistic view to what we were doing. Nothing better than rivalry channeled in the right way, both at national and discipline level within corporate.
I think a lot of the audience I know have international outposts, multiple offices across the world. And so the idea of a nationalistic challenge, you know, like a competition, how does that work out when you're dealing with Japanese, for instance, a culture very sensitive about certain things?
Absolutely.
Never going to have an insider, because why would anybody do that to us? Compared to maybe the passion of a Spanish outfit. I mean, how does that work?
It's the bit that you seek to channel. So Japanese, you know, I've been very fortunate to work for a lot of years with Japanese colleagues. Tremendously ethical, as you say, very, very clear. But actually it's also getting to know, and I'll speak about that perhaps later, it's about how you get to know the personalities that are involved. And I think if you do it, there are no national stereotyping. But guess what? The French are going to do a certain je ne sais quoi in terms of what they do with themselves. The Spanish and Portuguese will be very passionate. Japanese tend to be very analytical in terms of what you do. You pick up some of the touch points. You pick up humour. You pick up sport. Sport's the good one. It's amazing, certainly in the world of Suntory, football seems to be the game that sort of cuts across each piece as well. So we start using that. And it's always quite good because you've got inevitably 2 years between a major football tournament. So, and you can bring that into play as well.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So the third friction, and I'm moving swiftly on now, the third friction is emotion. And this is your ideas that cause anxiety. So people don't want to get on board with it because I don't know how to do that. You know, I'm concerned and it's going to take effort and so on. So Matt, can you give us examples of how to effectively influence the board? I mean, you've influenced several big boards to make them do the right thing, but whilst being personally aware of your own biases. So you have a bias towards tight security, but you have to understand the anxiety that's maybe causing. There's a good degree of empathy in that. And how do you strike that balance that's necessary for the business, as Gary and Guy both said, you know, understanding the business. So how do you do that?
Thank you, yeah. Hi, everyone. I think, first of all, the key point for me to understand is the role that the board actually plays. And if I think about where I am now, you know, where our executive leadership team are looking at a year, 2 years ahead for the success of the business, the board is looking at that 10-year strategic plan towards growth. For me, when I'm thinking about any security initiative that we want to take to the board that's pushing for investment or pushing for their support, the key thing is to really link your initiative to one of their, either a strategic priority or to a principal risk that is on their mind. If you can't make that link, you know, it's a little bit like when you're setting objectives for your team. If their objectives are not in support of your own, you have the wrong objectives, right? You've really got to build that pyramid up. It's exactly the same with pushing that investment case to say, if I can link what I intend to deliver to a strategic imperative for the board or to a principal risk that we know they're reviewing on a regular basis and thinking about, if I can't make that link, I'm doing the wrong thing, I'm pushing the wrong investment. The example I would give you, you know, I've only been with Tesco now for about 2 years. My initial observation in the security program was that we were not great on forward-looking threat intelligence, particularly geopolitical developments, but also local developments. We are primarily a UK business, albeit with a global footprint, and thinking about activism, for example, and how that might impact us. Clear gap in our program. But actually, if you looked at the company's published principal risks and you looked at the board's strategy, you could see a very direct link to that thinking around geopolitical risk. Positioning then this investment in growing threat intelligence was a really straightforward way of saying, I can help you with your problem. I don't need you helping me with my problem, I am helping you with yours. And the investment case was about as straightforward as
I've often heard speak of, you know, burying your security initiative inside of something else that's of value to the business. You know, Paul F. at MPSA would tell a story about trying to convince TfL to put blast-resistant film on tube trains, and they were like, we're not spending that money, and then he told them it was graffiti-proof, and all of a sudden they're like, well, I see 2 for 1. So you'd, you know, see what's of worth to the business and then bury your idea in amongst it. So the fourth resistance is called reactance, which I'm just going to come and ask each of them to give an opinion on. So reactance is basically pushback because they're being told what to do. You can't tell me what to do. It's classic, right? How many of you have come across well, you can't tell me what to do. You're not the security responsible. You are the security responsible person, but you're not the CEO. You can't tell me what to do. I think I see this a lot. When the security responsible person is not at the top of the tree, you always going to be up against it, I think. So have you got, what's your very quickly, best solution to overcoming the you can't tell me what to do issue? Matt, we're with you, so I'll come back this way.
I'll be honest, I've not come across a great deal of that resistance. If you're explaining what you're asking people to do logically and you're linking it to their values, their objectives.
Okay, so let me rephrase it then. So why have you not come across this? Is it because of the way you're doing your business?
I think 2 things. Simplicity of the message is key, but I also always look for leadership, sponsorship. Okay, so if I'm trying to, for example, around security culture, pushing to build security culture, it's far better if the CEO is talking about why it's important than the security guy, frankly. So looking for that sponsorship, landing that message really clearly through that senior voice can really help. And actually, just again, back to my previous point, it demonstrates this is important to the company, not just to the security guy.
Critical friend, yeah. Guy?
Yeah, I'd certainly go with that. I think I've been fortunate. I have met resistance characters before, but tend to wear them down. It's a feature of mine.
11 years in
no need
one
to laugh,
place.
everybody.
11 years will do that.
11 years kind of does that. I think it's, simple elements. I think they are simple to implement. Identify and engage key stakeholders in your organisation, and then listen, learn, influence. I think where possible, have conversations with those aforementioned key stakeholders at the coffee or the water point. Build a rapport early doors, establish that touch point knowledge of the person. I was doing some mentoring recently, talking to somebody who was saying it's a challenge for me to engage with senior leaders. Go and handbag them at the coffee point, the water point. Ask them about their family, their interests, their motivations, and utilise that as a baseline for the future collaboration in the workplace. But I think the key thing is, before anything happens, before the proverbial hits the fan, don't wait to speak to that key stakeholder at that particular moment. Have that rapport in place so that you are ready to talk with them prior to any incident or situation. So it's not, hi Rick, we've only just met, and by the way, there's a catastrophe we're dealing with. Oh, you support Manchester United, or there's the family. But you've established that connection and that rapport. So that would be my persuasive element piece.
Yeah. Gary?
I broke out in a cold sweat then. I was reflecting back on my career from the police. And probably back in 2014, I think I was seconded to a programme to do with austerity cuts. I had to do an organisational blueprint, i.e. wrapped up as cuts.
Yeah.
Which that organisation hadn't had any before. And going to do as many as people of this in workshops, tell them, don't worry, we're organising reorganising the organisation with a load of cops that had been in the organisation for 20 plus years. It did teach me a thing or two about organisational change. Yeah. And I go back to, it's like anybody else in any other business function introducing change. And the mapping of your key stakeholders, so they all need something different, is really, really important, how you deal with each individual. But you're part of that process and an enabler. You're not doing it all yourself. Things like giving unsolicited advice and all that kind of stuff, you just got to be wary of how you're treating people. The feedback I've had when we've had successful projects where we've initially had some resistance is because you're working alongside people and you're there when it's happening well, but you've also taken responsibility when it doesn't quite go as you'd planned. So you're not just saying we're a multi-venue site, we're working across multiple different cultures and regions and countries, and trying to work out how what everybody needs from you is important as well. But you've got to stand alongside people when you're delivering a project, good and bad.
Yeah, and what I take here now, just to sort of summarise to close, here's three heads of security, very senior security leaders that I think is obvious. There's empathy, you understand, but also a self-awareness. You understand where your strengths are, but capitalising on the teams around you so you don't have to do it all yourself. And sometimes you have to acknowledge that you don't have the skill or to connect with that person. So bring somebody in that they can associate with, because we all like to work with people like us, right? And we can't be like everybody. So I thank the panel. It's been fascinating. We don't have time for questions on this one, but please grab them in the breaks if you want to. Please can I have a round of applause for our panel.